Much like packing for a trip, serializing fiction on Royal Road requires planning. I know where I'm going, but I need to prepare in a way that gives my story the best chance to succeed. Last video, I assigned myself some tasks. So what's the status of copyright registration, my cover, reading other Royal Road stories, and continuing to write? Join me as I deal with the last of my baggage before embarking on this journey. First of all, I want to thank everyone who supported this channel. I had my first video get over 1,000 views, and I'm steadily gaining subscribers. I appreciate you. Now let's tackle the status of my to-do list in order. First off is copyright registration. This one was very straightforward, so I thought it'd be an easy task to check off the list. I was partially right. The site is easy to navigate, and it takes you through a series of forms. A lot of them repeat the same information: who you are, where you live, and how to contact you. The only somewhat tricky step is if you're using a pseudonym, like I am with W.P. Ogilvy, you have to check a box for that. Otherwise, everything was very intuitive. But somehow, I managed to even goof up that. When it came time to process the payment, it takes you to another site, and I panicked. I was afraid that the registration site wouldn't save all the fields I'd filled in, and that was a huge mistake. I ended up having to fill everything out again. Don't be like me. Trust that the site will navigate you properly. Eventually, I did get my work registered. Where am I at with my cover? I've talked a lot about my design ideas, and I assumed I was going to use a service like Reedsy to find a freelancer, or use a site like MIBL Art. Or is it Mibly Art? I don't know. Fortunately for us, another Royal Road author detailed his experience using their service. Jack Pembroke chose the full bells and whistle option costing $700, which included a digital cover, a print cover, as well as extra advertising options and formats. He chose to go with MIBL Art after going through various hiring sites and Reddit, where he got some undesirable results. I can understand why opting for a company with a bit more accountability is appealing. After paying $350 up front, the first step was to provide details about his story, attach comps of other artwork, and explain what he envisioned for the cover. Jack's book is called The Necromancer's End, so a lot of his description involved that theme. The next part is important. MIBL Art then gave him 2 concepts to choose from. Once he picked one of them, he could refine it as many times as he wanted, but he only got to work off of those 2 base options. Here's the first one, and here's the second. Jack wisely chose the second option, and then offered refining notes. He mentioned that it took about a week to receive the first mock-ups, and another week for them to address his first series of notes. The result of that refinement was this image, which is quite an improvement. He then continued to advocate for the cover he dreamed of. One of his biggest notes was these skeletal hands look quite cloned, which is very true. He also had some notes on the appearance of the secondary characters. Another week went by, and he got this. Again, much better. Jack then continued to be very specific about what he was looking for, as he should. When a company offers unlimited tweaks, you should really fight for what you believe in. And after several more weeks, he arrived at this as the final version. Personally, it's not my favorite style. I prefer more of an illustrated approach as opposed to photorealistic, but I think this is pretty eye-catching. True to their word, MIBL Art delivered the files in various formats. Jack highlighted that the marketing options really helped his campaign for Royal Road. Some of the files include artwork with no titles, a banner, a cool logo, just the title, and so on. He ended up being very happy with the service, which is great. I'm glad he was, especially due to the cost. What do you think, Tamby? Oh, you're just so cute. That said, he did end up changing it later to this, which I do think is a better cover. So what are my takeaways from Jack Pembroke's experience? The way he broke it down was invaluable. However, it did give me immense pause at wanting to use MIBL Art for a cover. Clearly, they're using clip art to assemble these covers, which is fine, but it doesn't lead to very unique results. I think it would be a huge challenge to get them to produce something that really stands out. I also wasn't thrilled by the timeline of the commission or how much advocacy it took. I understand they're running a business, but it seemed like they were phoning it in unless you really fought for what you wanted. I don't have the energy for that right now. I have enough on my plate. I want to find a professional who I can delegate the responsibility of the cover to. How about it, Tamby? Do you want the job? I'll take that as a no. With all that in mind, I decided to check out Reedsy blog. I was blown away by the variety of cover designers available. You have award-winning designers charging $2,200 for a cover, teams similar to MIBL Art, dedicated artists who will read your entire manuscript so that can inform their design choices. I gotta say, that's very appealing. Less experienced designers with strong portfolios, and artists whose specialty may not be cover design, but their style is very unique. I can see the appeal in all of those permutations. You can really find someone uniquely suited for your cover. I'd love to spend $2,200 hiring a master of their trade, but that's not really in my budget right now. For me, what was more realistic was finding an artist on the rise, or find someone who's trying to pivot more of their work into cover design. But hopefully that'd be justified by the reduced cost. I gotta say though, someone who actually reads your book, like Joshua, was very appealing. My main hesitancy with him is availability. That's gonna take time, and he's already pretty booked. I need a cover I can use soon. I want to start publishing to Royal Road. And when I started to reach out for quotes, I got this long form. All these details are critical to inform the artist, but it's a time investment on top of waiting for the work to be finished. That, coupled with the frequent spam I received from the Reedsy staff, kind of soured me a bit. Don't get me wrong, this is a wonderful service and one I'll use in the future, but it's not right for me now. What I want is cost-effective, quick, and still eye-catching. So where in the world could I find a unicorn like that? I ended up circling back to premade covers. They may not be perfect, and they may not be overly specific to my story, but I think it's a great place to start. The cost is low enough that if I go with something different later, I won't be kicking myself. Who knows? Even the title of my book could change. The only snag I experienced is PayPal processed the order as an e-check, which is delaying things. Because of that, I'll showcase the cover next video. How about my homework of reading Royal Road stories? I gotta say I was blown away by the options. There's some extremely high quality work on the platform. I was specifically looking to read multi-POV stories to make sure there's a market for mine. There were some standouts like Pale Lights, The Ballad of a Semi-Benevolent Dragon, and Cricket. Since these stories are so long, I read about 4 chapters of each to get a feel. Now I need to write reviews and add comments to each chapter I read. 2 of the other stories I read made interesting use of POVs, and one promised multiple main characters, but in the 5 chapters I read, they were all of the same POV. While I don't think multi-POV stories are ideal for the site, it was encouraging to see so many successful examples. And finally, how am I doing in terms of writing my own story? Being the goofy guy that I am, I realized that my first book is 95,000 words, not 85,000. That gives me a bit more to release on Royal Road. I divided it into roughly 31 chapters of about 3,000 words. My plan is to release the first 6 chapters immediately, so that I can hit the 20,000 word mark, which makes me eligible for the Rising Stars list. I'll then release 2 chapters a week. So for the first book, there's a buffer of 12.5 weeks. Yikes. I was hoping for more than that. Fortunately, I've been writing about 600 words per day for the new book, and have a total of about 16,000 unedited words. That gives me another 2.5 weeks. So I just need to stay diligent to avoid being buried by deadlines. Are you gonna hold me accountable, Tamby? Yeah. She always does. Formatting my work for Royal Road is another consideration. Typically, you don't indent paragraphs and you leave a full space between them. It seems like there's easy ways to translate your manuscript into this format. I'll explore those in a future video. Another stylistic choice I need to make is a divider. I use these quite frequently in my story. I'll experiment and see what I come up with. Chapter titles are another consideration. Currently, I have them named after the character whose POV you're about to read, and I think I'll try to do that on Royal Road. If that doesn't work, I'll have to come up with something else. Another big picture thing I need to consider is Royal Road is for serialized fiction, but I wrote my book as a novel. Will it format well into these subsections? I think so. I have a lot of cliffhangers, and the shifts between characters leads to a lot of drama. I think you can look at serialized fiction kind of like network TV. Each episode or chapter should be somewhat self-contained. You could discourage an audience with too much complexity, and some of the viewers or readers are multitasking. Whether they're juggling multiple stories at once, or playing video games in the background, if you want to appeal to the largest audience on Royal Road, multi-POV is not the way to go. I'm excited to see what the reaction to my story is. I've had some beta readers, but now I'm really making it public. Another easy task I checked off the list was creating a Royal Road account. I'll put a link in the description so we can connect on the site. I opted to set my display name as WP Ogilvy, and as a nod to the demographics of the site, added my old gamer tag, Wildebeest. I spent far too many hours in the past playing Dota, not Dota 2, and other MOBAs, so this isn't a hey fellow kids moment. Well, you look at that, a lot of progress was made. So what are some new entries on my to-do list? I need to write reviews and add comments on Royal Road, also participate on the forums and the subreddit. I need to come up with an eye-poppingly good blurb for my book, and think of some strategies to help an off-meta work thrive on Royal Road's platform. I'm excited. Next video will cover launching the story. Are you excited? Tough crowd.